ለመዘጋጀት
好，各位大家早上好欢迎大家今天来参加这个会议。那我们在即将开始之前呢，请大家可以拿个水伸展一下，然后呢把自己准备好，然后一起来参加今天的会议。谢谢。
Is that all the language instructions or do we need another one?
We're going to go ahead and
Assalamu alaikum.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Assalamu alaikum everybody. MashaAllah. Waa in salaanay soo dhawaada in shirka mar dhow noo bilaabanaya in haddii la yiraahdo in isku daya inaad xogaa yar jimicsataan shaah soo qaadataan in waa bilaabi doonaa luqadaada oo aad maaragtay Soomaaliga markaad u baahan tahay meesha wuxuu oran doonaa in French baa ku qornaan doona marka waana weydiin kartaa si aan ku caawino oo qolka saxda ah oo aad ka heli kartid aan kugu hagaajino waa mahadsantahay.
Una vez más, buenos días y bienvenidos a todos. Empezamos en breves minutos. Tómese un momento para ir por un vaso de agua, una tacita de café.
የአማርኛውን ደግሞ ቀጥላለሁ። ቅድም ብዬ ነበር እንግዲህ እንኳን ደህና መጣችሁ። ለማንኛውም አሁን ለመዘጋጀት ነው። ቡና የሚጠጣ ውሃ ምናምን ካላችሁ ተዘጋጁና በቅርብ እንጀምራለን ስብሰባውን። እናመሰግናለን።
好，各位大家好我们等一下呢，在会议开始的时候呢，会将这个中文频道的视频给那个音频给打开。那如果到时候您需要听这个普通话翻译的话呢，请你到时候在那个下面的那个地球的地方呢，点选之后呢，请你选中文的那个音频的频道就可以听到普通话的翻译了。好，谢谢您。
All right, thank you to our interpreters. We're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you, everyone, for being here with us today this morning. My name is Clarissa Thompson. I use she, her, hers pronouns, and I'm the Organizing Fellowship Manager with OneAmerica. Welcome to our first ever Early Learning Symposium. We're gathered together today from across the state to advance justice for early learning. Before we get started, we have a little bit of housekeeping to go over. First, we are going to be presenting all of this information in a variety of different languages. So we are shortly going to be launching our interpretation feature, and that's going to require some next steps from everyone here in this room. So once our interpretation gets launched, you're going to have two steps to follow. First, you're going to need to click the globe icon at the bottom center of your screen, and then you'll need to select your language preference. If you speak English, that means you select English. If you speak Spanish, you select Spanish. For logistical purposes, if you speak Mandarin, we're going to have you select Chinese. If you speak Amharic, we are going to have you select German. And if you'd like Somali interpretation, we're going to have you select French. If you're joining on a tablet or a smartphone, you can find the interpretation options by clicking the More icon at the bottom right corner of your screen, and that'll open up the different language channels that we have. So again, we haven't launched this interpretation yet. We're going to go over all the instructions, and then you'll be able to select your language preference. Richard, could you please go ahead and repeat the instructions in Mandarin?
Sure, thank you, Clarissa. 各位讲普通话以及需要这个普通话翻译的这个朋友们大家好。那再次欢迎大家来参加这个会议。那今天呢，我们即将有这个普通话翻译的这个频道开放给大家选择。那么呢如果您是使用电脑的话呢，那请你在电脑下方的这个地球的地方点选了之后，请你选一个 Chinese 的这个语言这个频道。那点选进去之后，就可以听到普通话的这个翻译哈。那如果您是用这个手机、智慧型手机或者是 iPad 的话呢，那请你记得在里面呢有一个 More， 也就是更多那个3点的更多当中，你点选了之后呢，你也就可以看到那个 Chinese， 就是中文的这个语言，你可以让你提供给你选择，以进到这个普通话的这个音频来听这个普通话。如果到时候呢，在这当中有什么问题的话呢，您都可以在视窗上面打上你的名字，然后呢，我们会有这个出色的杰出的工作人员，他可以跟你联系，进一步的协助你进入到这个听这个普通话的音频频道里面。好，谢谢 ，Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Marisela, can you please repeat the instructions for our Spanish speakers?
Hola, buenos días a todos. La persona que estaba hablando se llama Clarissa Thompson y ella es parte de una de las organizadoras de un grupo de OneAmerica. Las instrucciones son, si usted se está uniendo a nosotros a través de un computador, va a haber un icono como este que se muestra en la pantalla como un globo. Por favor, seleccione ese icono y seleccione el idioma de su preferencia. Esta mañana estamos teniendo interpretación en español, en mandarín, en amárico y en somalí. Entonces, por favor, le pedimos que seleccione el idioma de su preferencia. Si usted se está uniendo a nosotros desde un teléfono o una tableta, usted va a encontrar 3 puntitos que en inglés es more, en español dice más. Le pedimos que seleccione esa opción y seleccione el idioma de su preferencia. Si usted se está uniendo a nosotros desde una tableta que los niños usan, conocida como Chromebook, lamentablemente el sistema de interpretación no funciona. Necesitaría unirse a nosotros desde un teléfono. Muchísimas gracias por acompañarnos. Bienvenidos. Estamos muy emocionados porque este es nuestro primer simposio que estamos lanzando en el campo de aprendizaje temprano. Gracias. Thank you.
Thank you, Marisela. All right, can we please have Ubha provide the instructions in Somali?
maasha allah aad umahadsantihiin mar kale maanta kusoo dhawaada shirkan qiimaha leh oo aad kala qayb galaysaan OneAmerica turjubaanka waxaad ka helaysaa calaamad waxaad arki doontaa sida qariirada oo kale ah haddaadan qariirada u jeedin waxaa laga yaabaa inaad aragtid meesha ku qoran tahay more calaamada ah midoo taabo midii hadba kuu soo baxda meeshaasaad waxaad ka helaysaa luqadaada saxda ah haddaad ingiriis qofkii u baahan inuu ku dhageysto waxaad taabanaysaa meesha ingiriiska oranaysa waxay kaloo meesha ka arki doontaa luqadda Isbaanishka iyo Chineeska iyo Amhariga iyo waxaa arkaysaa Soomaaliga maanta Soomaaliga markaad rabtid ma arkaysid Soomaali meel ku qoran tahay laakiin waxaad arki doontaa French Faransiiska luqadda French markaad aragtid waxa weeyaan Soomaali ka wadaan maadaama uusan zoom ku lahayn calaamad Soomaali aysan ka heli karin Amhariga qofka doonayna German buu arki doonaa Chinese iyo Mandarin waa iska caadiga Spanish wada arki doontiin aad baa mahadsantihiin taabo meesha luqadaas oo Faransiga ku taala si Soomaaliga qolkooda u maqashid waa mahadsantahay.
Perfect, thank you. And last but certainly not least, Asmarit, could you please give the instructions in Amharic?
All right, will do. ሰላም እንደምን አደራችሁ እንትን እዚህ እንግዲህ ተገናኝተናል ለስብሰባ አሁን እንትን እኔ ማዘጋጀው ያለችው የምትናገር የነበረችው ክላሪሳ ትባላለች እና እዚሁ OneAmerica የሚባል የድርጅት ውስጥና የማዘጋጀት ዋና የምትመራው ያለችው እንግዲህ በተለይ አሁን ለስብሰባው እሷ ናት። እንኳን ደህና መጣችሁ። አሁን ዛሬ እንግዲህ ሁላችንም አንዴ ከተሰባሰቡ በኋላ የተለያየ ክፍል ይኖረናል ማለት ነው ለመነጋገር። እንግሊዝኛ የሚናገሩት ያው እዚህ ይቆያሉ፣ ስፓኒሽ የሚናገሩትም የራሳቸው ክፍል ይኖራቸዋል። ከዛ መንደሬን የሚናገሩት ደግሞ የምንጫነው ነገር አለን። መጀመሪያ ያቺ የዓለም የምትመስለዋን ምልክት እንጫንና ከዛም በኋላ የምንፈልገውን ቋንቋ እንነካለን ማለት ነው። አሁን መንደሪን ለሚናገሩት ቻይኒዝ ያደርጋሉ። አማርኛ ለምንናገረው ደግሞ ጀርመን የሚል ነው። ምክንያቱም ይሄ ዙም እንደሱ በአማርኛ የሚል ነገር ስለሌለው በአማርኛው ምትክ ጀርመን ነው የምናደርገው። ለሶማሌዎች ደግሞ ፍሬንች ነው የሚያደርጉት ማለት ነው። እና አንድ የዓለሟን ምልክት ከነካችሁ በኋላ መልሰን እኛ በተለይ አሁን አማርኛ የምንናገረው ጀርመን ስለሆነ ያለው እዚህ የተሰጠው ጀርመንን እንጫናለን። ከዛ እንቀጥላለን ማለት ነው። ግን በቴሌፎን በአይፎን ወይ ደግሞ ታብሌት ለምትጠቀሙ ደግሞ ተጨማሪ የምትላለች ከዓለም ከዓለም ምልክት ቀጥሎ ያለችው ሞር የምትለውን እሷን በመጫን መመሪያውን ተከትላችሁ ደግሞ በታብሌት ወይም ደግሞ በአይፎን የምታደርጉ ከሆነ በዛ መመሪያ ደግሞ እንመራለን ማለት ነው። እና መልካም ስብሰባ ያደርግልን። እንግዲህ እናመሰግናለን። ቴንክ ዩ።
Wonderful. Thank you. All right, we are going to go ahead and launch our interpretation feature. So go ahead and select that option that works best for you. Even if you're speaking English, you're still going to need to select a channel.
Okay, that was my question. So it says English to German. I get it.
La interpretación se ha asignado, entonces por favor, siga las instrucciones que les dimos.
Great. We have also put our interpretation instructions in the chat. All right, I'm going to give just a couple more seconds for everyone to select their language preference. All right, we're going to go ahead and continue with our program here. I'd also like to ask everyone to please remember to speak slowly. Our interpreters are working really hard today to get all of this information out to everyone, and we can make their jobs a lot easier by speaking clearly and slowly as we present our information today. If you have any questions, feel free to type them into the chat box. We have plenty of staff available to assist you. And we're going to go ahead and jump on in here. Before we move on with our first presentation, I'm going to quickly go over our community guidelines. This event is providing an opportunity for us to discuss social issues and share our experiences. And with that in mind, we want everyone on Zoom today to feel safe and respected. During this event, we're going to be abiding by the following guidelines. First, please be respectful of people's boundaries, pronouns, and the validity of lived experience. Derogatory or discriminatory language or attitudes aimed towards any marginalized or historically oppressed group will not be tolerated. Please communicate openly with respect for others. Be sure to critique ideas rather than individuals. And do what you need to feel comfortable in this space. Feel free to step away, stretch, eat, or rest as needed. If an activity or attitude does not abide by these community guidelines, you'll be removed from the call and a staff member will reach out to you. For most of this event, we're also going to keep folks muted to minimize distractions and noises in the background. All right. With that, I'm going to go ahead and hand things off to Kelly, who will be moderating our first discussion. Kelly, take it away.
Okay, so I'm so excited to get this started today. My name is Kelly Blucher, and I am a leader, an advocate, and most important title, of course, is Mom of Three, who you can see in my background today, because after all, this is all about them. Thank you all for joining the first Early Learning Symposium held by ChildCare Aware of Washington, Washington State Parent Ambassadors, MomsRising, OneAmerica, the West African Community Council, and Washington Family Engagement. Special thanks to our sponsors, Perigee and the Stolte Foundation, for helping to make this day possible. Today is about the grassroots leaders that make up our organizations and the organizations we partner with. We want to share information about our legislative agenda, provide tools to share your stories, and advocate for the issues that you care about. Although we won't be able to do that all in one day, we hope this lays a foundation for our continued advocacy together. Today, you're going to hear from many of our different leaders and community organizational leaders about their stories and what drives them to work. At the end of today, we will be asked to make sure we continue what we have learned and we continue to advocate for our children and our early learning community. Your stories and your voice will be heard. We again thank you for spending the next 4 hours with us. And we know that that is a long time on Zoom. And you've heard this a lot, but make sure, be kind to yourself and take breaks as needed. With that, let's go ahead and get started on our first panel. So again, I'm filling in today on that first part. So introducing myself again, I'm Kelly Blucher, and I've been in advocacy now for quite some time, and parent and that grassroots leader, and certainly a passionate advocate for children and families. Just 2 short years ago, I was learning to find my voice and to share my story. And I'm excited to share today as you all are gathered with us to do the same. My personal story of childcare and being a working mother put me on a journey that I never expected. I testified over and over, eventually even speaking at the White House on the needs of childcare and family paid leave. I have watched the change that is possible through the power of our voice. And together we can create a brighter future for our children, our early learning centers, teachers, staff, and our working families. We are each lifting our rising tide together, centering our communities and lifting them to leadership on a tide of justice and love. I love that line. Although we have been unable to gather in person, together we are powerful, and that's what brings me hope. I am so excited to welcome the next 2 wonderful guests and champions for children and families who have joined us today. Both of these fabulous legislators have been mentors to me personally, guided me on a journey, and so many others. Representative Tana Sen and Senator Claire Wilson are here to share their journeys in the legislature and how advocacy indeed goes a very long way. I'm so excited. So welcome, Rep. Sen and Senator Wilson. It is absolutely so amazing to see you here today. All right, I had to switch my screen to make sure I could really see you, and I wanted to see your faces, so I'm just utterly so excited. So can you both introduce yourselves and your positions in the legislature, and of course tell us your interest in early learning issues and what brings you to this work? Rep. Sen, let's go ahead and start with you.
Thank you, Kelly. Man, you said that you found your voice, and man, is it powerful. Woo! I love working with you, so keep it up. I am State Representative Tana Sen from the 41st Legislative District, which includes Renton, Newcastle, Mercer Island, Bellevue, Issaquah, Sammamish, and Beaux-Arts Village. And I chair the Children, Youth, and Families Committee in the House. And I also serve on the Appropriations Committee, which is the Budget Committee. And I serve on local government, given all those cities that I have, and I'm a former city councilwoman. I started off my interest as studying to be a teacher. And of course, it was all about learning about education and its benefits and its strength. And I morphed into public policy and into urban planning and to women's issues. And there was nothing more intersectional about childcare than helping women become economically secure and ensuring kids have a great start in life and to education. So the Fair Start for Kids Act just exemplifies all of that and brings it together. And it really was created by listening to all of you and to people around the state. And I'm sure we'll get more into that, but I want to thank you all for being here and for being the voices, because that is what's powerful and really moves the needle. My dear colleague, Senator Wilson, I'll turn it to you.
Well, I am just, this is like, oh, this talk about full circle. I just have to say that you probably know me better all as Claire, because that's who I am to so many of you in this room. So, this has been a powerful 2 days, Rep. Sen. We've been in rooms with just amazing people who have been the absolute embodiment of the work. And I'm a little bit emotional because I see so many people on this Zoom today who actually have been the fighters for so very long. So today I will introduce myself as Senator Claire Wilson, and I represent the 30th Legislative District, which is in South King County, and it includes Federal Way, unincorporated Auburn, Des Moines, Algona, Pacific, and Milton. And I think more than that, for many years have represented families who have not found a voice or a place for their voice in all systems of government and institutions across the state. And to be very honest, my interest comes because for 35 years, I was coming down to Olympia with all of you, trying to advocate for things that were so important to me and things that were important to all of you, and could never seem to get the change made that we needed. And suddenly found myself in the Senate 40 years later, where no longer do I have to try to convince people about how important this is, but I can actually influence and make the change and work with champions like Rep. Sen to do what we've been trying to do for so very long. And you've heard me say we're one of the only places in the world where it feels like you have to do the wrong thing to get what you need to do it right. And if we actually supported families and children from the very beginning, we wouldn't be, I think, where we are today. And so you are the reason for the change, and you are the change, and your voices mean more than anything, as do your stories. And you are representative of what a community is. John Kretzmann calls community anything with 4 walls and a welcome mat. And this is probably one of the most welcoming communities I've ever been part of. And I'm just so honored to be here today.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So what do you see as, oh, sorry.
Really quickly, I apologize. We're having a couple of issues with our interpretation. And so before we hear more from Representative Sen and Senator Wilson, we're quickly going to turn off our interpretation feature and then relaunch it. So everyone, you're going to need to reselect your channel as soon as we relaunch it. It should only take a minute.
如果没有什么问题的话，是否可以跟我打个 yes 或者是说跟我提醒一下？谢谢你们。
Thank you. And it sounds like our interpreters were getting those instructions out there as well. So April's going to do some Zoom wizardry in the background here, and we will relaunch in just a minute or so.
这个先生女士听普通话的，再一次跟您询问一下，你们目前这个翻译没有什么问题吧？如果有问题的话，是否可以跟我打个讯息说没问题 no problem， 还是打中文没问题也都行哈。
apagaron el sistema de interpretación porque estamos teniendo algunas dificultades y lo van a volver a relanzar.
laymanka turjubaanka ayay dib ugu soo celin doonaan marka bal adinku taabta meesha oo luqadda faransiga French ku qoran tahay si aad Soomaaliga u soo gashaan dib bay laynka haddana u soo celinayaan
አማርኛ የምትናገሩ በሙሉ እንግዲህ ወደ እንትን የብቻችን ክፍል አለንና ወደዛኛው ክፍል እንሄዳለን ማለት ነው ስናገር እናንተ ብቻ ናችሁ የምትሰሙኝ ማለት ነውና ጀርመን የምትለዋን ተጫኑና ወደዛ እንሄዳለን አመሰግናለሁ all right thank you
Thank you guys. I'm working on it. Okay, we should be good.
Ok, la interpretación se volvió a activar. Por favor, seleccione el idioma de su preferencia. Busque el icono de un globo en el fondo de la
Everybody have the
pantalla.
opportunity to select their interpretation language.
Make sure, even if you are speaking English, you select English again. Everyone has to do it. And thank you for your patience so we can be inclusive.
Sí, gracias.
All right, I am
Sí, muchísimas
hearing
gracias.
our
All right, I think we're
interpretation
good,
in the
Kelly.
background. So Kelly, you are welcome to continue our program here. Thank you.
Oh, well, we're thankful to be able to have this in this presentation in so many languages. It's so important for us to be inclusive and it's just amazing. So Rep Sen and Senator Wilson, let's do this one more time. So what do you see as the opportunities and challenges of early learning work? It's a big question.
That is a huge question. I will jump in first and then turn it over to my colleague. I think the workforce is the biggest issue right now, and that is ensuring that we have enough teachers and that they are paid enough to stay in childcare, to provide the high quality childcare and love that we know kids need, and to have the supports to continue to educate and support them as they deal with kids who maybe have additional challenges or just to build their expertise. And right now, we are not paying them enough. Right now, we are not giving them enough respect and support. And that impacts the workforce, which means there's less childcare available for families. So that, of course, impacts parents and grandparents and caregivers' ability to go to work and to get on a sound economic footing. And of course, that also means kids oftentimes are in less than ideal situations just because the families have to make something work. So I think right now it's about the workforce. I will leave it at that.
Senator Wilson? Thank you, Rep Sen.
Well, there's nothing I disagree with that Rep Sen just talked about. And I think perhaps one of the things that may be a challenge is the belief that because we were able to pass an historic landmark legislation called Fair Start for Kids last session, that we have fixed the broken system. And so, and we know we haven't. We know we've just begun to finally start to create a system that we know we've needed for so many decades, but clearly has not really been understood. And that in order for economic recovery to actually happen, this is the profession, the industry, and the place we need to focus so families can be safe while they know their children or their families can go back to work. So they know their children are safe in someone's care. And the workforce issue is so important because subsidies are available, but slots and spaces in care are not because of the staffing issues right now. And so it's really important to make sure individuals understand that, because it looks like there's lots of support, but people aren't taking us up on what it is we've created. And so that's an additional challenge. And I will second and third and fourth the salary, the pathway, and creating a living wage so that individuals in this profession don't have to go to bed at night wondering how it is they're going to open their business and their doors for families every single day.
Yeah, thank you. So true, and still so much work to be done. I can't believe it's been 3 years ago I testified in front of both of you for the first time, and I really just had no idea the impact a story could have. We good? Sorry about that. I heard somebody jump in there. So can you really share with us the role that advocacy plays during the legislative session, and specifically sharing our stories with legislators? And if I can just ask everybody to mute. I know my little advocate just joined me in here as well, so I get that. And do you want me to repeat the question? I certainly can.
No.
Yeah.
The power of your voice.
Yeah.
The power of voice.
Yeah, it really cannot be understated how impactful your very personal stories are. There are lobbyists who tell us the bill number and the data, the numbers, the facts, but what sticks with legislators, what we remember in our heart, is the personal stories, because we can't rattle off those numbers again, because that's just too much. But what we can remember and we take with us are the personal stories, because it brings a policy issue into reality, into something, we can relate to. Keep in mind, legislators are just citizens, just residents, just people like you. We just happen to be elected. So we need to really understand and hear how something impacts you and your family day to day. And that's what moves us. That's what we can share with another colleague. That is just how we better and best process, is to really hear your personal story about the impact of having the care or not having the care, what it means for you, for your kids, for your work, for your hopes and dreams, for your wallet. That's really what's so impactful.
I would agree. And I would say you have lived experience that 90% of individuals who are making decisions for you do not have. They can't even imagine what it would be like to live on $200 a week, $1,000 a month, $25,000 a year. No idea why your stories matter so much and why you matter so much. And I know when I went first, I thought I needed to know what was in a bill. That doesn't matter. What matters, as Rep. Sen said, is how something impacts you as a person, as a parent, as a member of your community, as a member of the state of Washington. That's what matters. It doesn't matter your immigration status. It doesn't matter your color. It doesn't matter your sexual orientation. It doesn't matter your language. Those things are things that people need to hear and they need to know about, because they have no idea in their own life how these things and how these decisions they're making every day impact people. And I will say, because of the pandemic, it's the first time that it didn't really matter how much money you had. You couldn't find toilet paper, right? Didn't matter how much money you had. You couldn't find childcare. And so this was the first time that so many people on the floor of the Senate and the floor of the House started to understand, and suddenly it was an urgent issue. We call that privilege. And so we take advantage of that, but we'll never forget all of us in this room that have been struggling and challenging to change the system for so many years. So I'm taking advantage of privilege and saying, okay, if this is what it's going to take for you to sign off on this bill, we're going to go for it. So, you know, that's what matters. And I will just also say one more thing. The advocacy and the stories don't just happen during session. So if you're part of a program, or if you are in a childcare center, or you're part of Head Start or ECAP, or if you're in a family, friends, and neighbors, or whatever you do, any time is a time to invite individuals into your world and show them what you know and who you are and what you do. And an example I will give is I have a wonderful center in Tacoma, Multicultural Family Hope Center. And I took all of the policy and fiscal staff who do the budgets and write the policies on a tour of MCFHC, and they spent the morning there. We brain danced with the 3- and 4-year-olds. We went and spent the entire morning at a center so that never again, when they were writing a budget or writing about a slot, would they think of anything other than those children that they had interacted with for 4 hours. And it makes all the difference in the world, and you make all the difference in the world.
You know, I was reminded as both of you were talking, and it brought tears to my eyes. One of the times that I testified in front of both of you, I had brought my mother, and I looked at my mom when I was testifying, and I said, 30 years ago, my mom faced the same problems that I face now. I don't want my daughter to be here again in 20 or 30 years. And it just, I think all of us went into tears during that moment. Mm-hmm. So true. So tell us a little bit, why is it important? So not only that we have our personal stories, but why is it important that coalitions work together when approaching the legislature? And what can we do as a collective when it comes to the implementation of bills, specifically the Fair Start for Kids Act?
Well, the power of having organizations work together is, just as there are childcare deserts, there might be advocacy deserts, although you're working to change that, or just times when people are, one group who they work with, those families are too busy. And so you have more people to collect, to reach out to a legislator. It is also, of course, helpful to show the breadth of the impact of an issue, that it's not just for one organization or one community, but it's really an issue that impacts so many organizations, communities, and families. I forgot the second part of your question. I had something really smart to say.
It was just what can we do as a collective when it comes to the implementation of bills?
Yes, thank you, the implementation. So, when we pass policies, that's great, but it's still just words on paper until we get the word out. So, in particular, making sure that childcare providers know that there's help paying for healthcare premiums, making sure families know that we have capped copays if you're getting Working Connections childcare at $115, that eligibility has increased dramatically. So if you got a minimum wage increase, a new job, or stayed in the same situation, but before you didn't qualify, you should reapply.
Yeah.
Because the likelihood that you now qualify is way higher. And when I say qualify, I mean for assistance from the state to pay for childcare. So the implementation is so much about getting the word out.
Yes.
Because as legislators and as the Department of Children, Youth, and Families, the department pays childcare providers. So they have a direct conduit. They have a direct line to the childcare providers, but not necessarily to parents, not to community, not to grandparents, not into people's homes, because that's not their job. That's not who they usually communicate with. So this is about organizations who already have the trust of the community, and that's a huge piece, who already have the trust of community members to share the information in different languages, in different ways that they can comprehend the benefits, and that they'll be accepting of interacting with the government to get those benefits. And so really it's about your organizations being trusted partners, trusted leaders, and getting the word out to as many people who don't normally have the channels that would hear about a piece of legislation coming out of Olympia.
And what I would say is we have institutions of government and we have institutions of education. And early learning is not an institution. It is an informal weave of systems that are in communities that create programs that meet the needs of communities. And it's kind of done, if you would say, by band-aiding things together. So putting a band-aid on things just to hold it together. And so for me, the power of the coalitions coming together is it strengthens what is an informal system. And as a family childcare provider, you sit in your home by yourself and you may not know that there's a whole group of other family childcare providers and you can't figure out how to connect with them. And that's where coalitions and the power of more than one, it's each one reach one. And when you can come together collectively and then think from all different sides. And an example I'm going to use is around families, family structure, beliefs around families. And as we think about choice and we think about parents, there are so many perspectives about what's important and what one wants to see and needs to see. And so we have to have choice, we have to have options, and we have to have voice. And that's where it is so important. And when you don't have a formal structure, as Rep. Sen kind of talked about, it's hard to know where a door is. And you then come together and there's safety in numbers. That's what I'll also say is Kelly would have never come down to Olympia probably on her own unless she knew that she had people beside her, behind her, and in front of her to make sure that she could never fail. And that's the power of coming together and really creating, like I said, a larger community. Anything with 4 walls and a welcome mat to come, and you then become a voice even for others who cannot find their voice or haven't learned how to use it yet, or have not been invited to the table yet. So, you know, that's so important. The only other thing I would say is language access is incredibly important, and you bring value like nobody else. And I'm going to say coalitions like the Home Language Campaign, remember, where through OneAmerica, and remember, you know, we have parent ambassadors, we have Somali Parent Education Board, we have all of these groups of individuals who really inside the institutions couldn't find a place or a space for their voice. So what y'all do, you just created them yourself, right? So y'all have to come together and create a bigger coalition to come and share. And I will also just say to you, and this has nothing to do with that, but it has everything to do with that. You will see a bill this session for compensation for lived experiences for individuals who sit on work groups and commissions and other kinds of groupings that come together because of legislation, where no longer will, hopefully will one be invited to the table to share an experience, but then not being valued for the time that they're there. And so that's also so important.
That's
I could go on for days, and I'm stopping now because y'all got me going.
Well, you're passionate about this, and we so appreciate this. So last question that's absolutely on everyone's mind today. I know it is mine. What is most important this session, and what stories are needed and will be most effective? I mean, tell us a little bit about those bills that are coming up, how we can get involved, and what you need from us.
Well, I could maybe start on this one, and I'm just going to really do two things. One is clearly we've got to figure out salaries, and I don't know how we're going to do that. That is a long-term issue, but I just want everyone to know it is an issue, and it's not just about salary, it's about benefits. It's about how do we create a schedule that's similar to what you would see in the value of 2001 days, which is when a child starts kindergarten and beyond. One thing I will tell you is a bill around working connections, childcare, and unemployment, so that it started last session. We didn't get it through, but bringing it back so that families can access working connections childcare subsidies while they're doing job search and while they're doing looking for employment. That's really important to me. The second piece, and I'm certain Rep. Sen will say the same thing, it's really not about legislation. It's about how it is we get the word out and we let parents know, families know, providers know about the implementation and about what's available within Fair Start. So not only that families, if you're eligible, are capped at $115 copay, not only that providers have an increase in their subsidy rate, but there are funds available for equity grants, for dual language supports, for infant toddler mental health consultation, for things that are really, really important. And I'm going to stop and pass it on to Rep. Sen.
I think it's a bit trickier this year because I don't think there's very much legislation, like actual bills. There's a lot that we can ask for the budget. And so I think the most impactful places to testify this session is in the budget committee. One thing I'm exploring, and Senator Wilson, this I'm glad you're here to hear this too, is for our, COVID is still here, right? As we all unfortunately know quite well. And Fair Start is meant to be a long-term investment and a long-term plan. But that doesn't mean that we stop helping childcare right now survive the pandemic. And so that's gonna have to be the emphasis. So for K-12, we have something called Hold Harmless, which says if you have under enrollment, if you have more kids who stayed home and didn't come back to school or register for school, we're going to pay the schools for the number of kids they had 2 years ago before the pandemic. And we need to continue to do that for childcare, or not continue to do that again for childcare, which means we're paying them for their enrollment, not for attendance. So if children are enrolled, but they're staying home because of COVID or whatever, the parents can't afford it, that we're paying the childcare for enrollment and not attendance, which is a hold harmless for that childcare. Because we have to help childcare make it through the pandemic. Yeah. If they don't survive, if they're not there now, and when COVID subsides, then it's much harder to start and reopen the economy, new childcare, etc. So we have to do all that we can to continue to support childcare now. And I think we need to make sure that legislators don't feel like we passed Fair Start, we're done. Now, if you want to do federal advocacy, passing Build Back Better on the federal level will be the game changer for sure, because that is a federal dollars coming in, which is just a magnitude of money so much bigger than what the state has. So that's where I would, again, in the Appropriations Committee, focusing on legislators who are in the appropriations in the House or Ways and Means in the Senate, I think is where your voice will be the most valuable.
That's really interesting to hear the federal connection. Of course, it's always there. I mean, that's where a lot of our dollars come from, but to actually think about advocating on a federal level, that's a really good point. I know I'm in, put me in, coach, I'm there. Well, I could talk to you both all day long. I'm just so happy to have had this opportunity, as is, I know the chat has just been blowing up. You are just amazing leaders in our community. And as always, it's just such a pleasure to be in a virtual room with you. Senator Wilson, I see you.
I just want to say, the other thing you need to know is testifying is remote this session. So you can sit at your kitchen table. You hear my dog? So I'm at my kitchen table, just like you would be if you were testifying. And I did put in the chat the link to the directions on how to testify during committee and such. And I know as a group, you all are going to be tracking bills, which is also one of the questions was, how do I know, like if it's in budget committee or when it'll be there? But there will be also bills that may not be Fair Start, but you'll see one that's a baby bonds bill for kids that are born under Apple Health. You'll see a diaper thing that Rep. Sen's got going down. There's some bills in the House. So keep your eyes open, because even though they may not come under Fair Start for kids, or Rep. Sen and I may not be doing the bills ourselves or sponsoring them, there are many legislators very interested in this who are parents themselves or have a deep interest. So the bills will come from a number of different places. So keep your eyes open. Also, if you want to set up a time to meet, you can also touch base with your legislator individually during session. And like for me, just know it's a 15-minute window, but I always will set aside time for people, because they are far more important than the lobbyists or folks who are paid to push an issue or push an idea. I want to hear from folks who are impacted.
Yeah, and honestly, I don't want to say don't waste your time, because that sounds wrong, but because we are all remote, a postcard campaign or a letter writing campaign just won't even show up for us, because we're all home. So, email is fine, if you personalize it. But again, right now, paper, just, I don't even know where it goes, to be perfectly honest. So save your time for the virtual. That's actually, it's easier, it's quicker, but just save your time there. And then Kelly, if I can just address one issue in the chat, if we have a couple minutes.
Absolutely.
I know this is a little bit beyond what we're talking about here, but one of the tricky parts about specific salary assistance for childcare providers is that we do have a mixed delivery system, which we love and which is so strong. And that means some childcare is offered through schools, some through, Head Start, ECAP, which is more kind of federally and state funded, and then a lot of private childcare, which we need, which is whether it's centers or homes. And so each of those places might have a couple of kids who are receiving state dollars, like Working Connections childcare. Some might have 100%, some might have 5%. The only way we get, and family, friends, and neighbors, thank you, Cecilia. The only way that we get dollars out is through subsidized childcare. So even if we build into those rates additional dollars for childcare providers, if they have more private pay kids, then that additional dollars isn't going to go very far in paying their staff more. And because they're a private business, it's challenging for the state to give money to a private business. So that's just the complicated factor. We're still working on it. That's why we did the healthcare subsidies, because that can apply to everybody. So there's, we've gone round and round trying to figure out how best we can ensure that dollars go directly to increase pay for workers, but that's definitely an impact.
And I think the only thing I would add to that is my interest is making sure it's the full system of care. So birth through, not just individuals or systems who take care of, say, 3 and 4-year-olds. And so we have to make sure that when we're looking at things, in my mind, we, create the full system and supports for wherever one chooses to care for children, whether it's the K-12 system or the birth through 12, I would say, because we need to include school age care as well. And then we also do have to consider family, friends, and neighbors, which is a choice for many families. And sometimes it's a choice because there's not care other places. But for some, it is a choice and it's a good one. And we also have to figure out what that looks like. And although it may not be salary, we have to consider what resources folks might need. Because again, our world has changed and we don't have aunties and uncles and grandmas and grandpas like many of us may have grown up with to care for us in our own neighborhoods. So anyway, just thanks so much for this opportunity today.
Yeah, thank you, Kelly. Thank you, April. Thank you, Roxana. Thank you to everybody who's here. It's great to see so many people that we've worked with over the years to get this passed. So this improvements in the state work around childcare is really so much thanks to you. We truly, Senator Wilson and I are very powerful, but I have to say your voices are way more powerful than ours. So we're just the conduit. So thank you so much for having us today and for all you do.
You were both just so amazing. I could do this all day with you. Well, thank you so much. It's just wonderful to have you here. And maybe if you can put your contact info, if that's okay, in the chat, so that maybe people can reach out to you individually and schedule that 15 minutes. But thank you so much. And with that, I believe I am going over to Hannah.
Hi there. Thank you. It is great to be here. Again, thank you, Representative Sen and Senator Wilson, for your dedication to uplifting children and families. My name is Hannah Gregory. I am the Early Learning Action Alliance Coalition Director. The Early Learning Action Alliance is a coalition of over 60 organizations across the state of Washington advocating for high quality early learning. ELAW brings together a constellation of diverse organizations, each contributing their expertise to early learning advocacy. The group is designed to strengthen the efforts of each participating organization, and success requires that participating organizations devote some organizational resources to activities that contribute to effective policy and advocacy. Our mission is to ensure that every Washington child, regardless of their race, ethnicity, geography, ability, family structure, or family economics, has equitable access to the relationships, education, and opportunities they need to be thriving by the time they enter kindergarten. As we prepare for the start of session next week, I'd like to share with you all our 2022 legislative agenda. It has been less than a year, and the 2021 Fair Start for Kids Act is already lowering the high cost of quality childcare for families across Washington state. Despite this progress, many of our families, businesses, and essential early childhood professionals are still struggling. As we continue through the pandemic, we must address the early learning workforce crisis, which impacts child well-being and the ability for workers across all industries to continue working. We urge legislators to use available funding for strategies to recruit and retain new providers to the early learning field. Working together this year, we would like to support compensation for lived experience by working in conjunction with other advocacy groups to compensate participants with lived experience at department meetings and working groups. We are also asking to reduce barriers to workforce recruitment by reforming the background check process with a long-term investment to ensure a 72-hour turnaround for early learning applicants, and support funding for background check application and fingerprint processing fees for early learning workers. We would also like to support the Fair Start for Kids programs that need consistent funding sources and are asking for $185,000 for continuing the infant and early mental health consultation, $3.1 million for expansion of the family, friend, and neighbor care, and to fund a data collection on transitional kindergarten. We request that school districts collect key information related to transitional and developmental preschool prior to further expansion of the program. Our support agenda consists of supporting the conversion of 2,212 part-day early childhood education assistance program ECAP slots to full and extended day slots, and fund nearly 9 weeks of ECAP during the summer of 2022. We are also on our support agenda. We would like to provide funding for curriculum and assessments to support ECAP program providers. Thank you for letting me share our agenda today with you, and I'm honored to be working along such great advocates and for us to continue to work together to further opportunities for children and families in Washington state. Thank you for letting me be here.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Carolyn Solitaire, and I'm a mom, an education advocate, and a grassroots leader in my community. I'm so pleased to be here today with all of you. I care deeply about our education system because as a parent, I saw how it impacted my children directly. When my twins were in the 4th grade, their teacher wanted to hold one of them back and move the other one to the next higher grade level. As an involved mom, I didn't let this happen. But I did end up devoting all my evenings to his schoolwork. What I discovered during these evenings is that he didn't need to be held back. He just needed to be taught a different way, something that the system didn't have the flexibility to do. Today, he has his own business, providing counseling and mental health services. I'm so proud of him. And with this mental health services, this is something that we desperately need going through this COVID pandemic. I know that my story is not unique, and there are so many other parents out there that have been through the same thing or had the same experience. An education system that does not meet their kids' learning styles. And we all have so many different styles. Today, we have Addie Simmons from Washington Family Engagement, Isa Ndi from West African Community Council, Magali Solis from La Casa Hogar, and Luke Yasmin from Parkview Early Learning Center. We will be asking them a series of questions. And if you have questions for them, please don't hesitate to put it in the chat, and we will get to some of them near the end. So, for my first question to the panelists, I would really love it if you could introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit about what drives you to this work. And if you could, please try to keep it under 2 minutes. And we can go ahead and start with Addie.
Thank you so much. Such a pleasure to be here this morning with all of you. It's wonderful to see our representatives and senators here as well, and understand better what's going on in Olympia. It's always so powerful. Thank you. My name is Addie Simmons. I'm the Executive Director of Washington Family Engagement, a nonprofit organization statewide that focuses on empowering and preparing parents to become leaders and to be able to advocate for their children, for other children at different levels. So Washington Family Engagement has been around for almost 8 years now, and we have prepared hundreds of parents to do this work. So I'm very, very happy to be here. So a little bit about my story. Why am I here? Well, just walk back to my college years when I was a mom with 2 small kids attending the University of Washington and majoring in communication and journalism. I needed money, I needed funds. So I took a job as a Head Start interpreter. Spanish is my first language. So the experience that I gained, the whole world that opened up to me by being in parents' homes with with small children, in particularly low-income parent homes, was an incredible change. It changed me personally. It changed my worldview. It changed what I wanted to do in my life. So I learned how families survive, the skills, the amazing skills and strengths that families develop by living day by day and surviving in very harsh and discriminatory environments and systems. I learned how to take care of families, how to advocate, and how to help them improve their life. another thing is that they know so much. They know many times better than we do. This experience changed my life. So in a nutshell, I went back to, I did graduate in communication journalism, but I went back to school to get a degree in education and completely change my goals because I felt that within the education system, I could advocate for families. I could better serve children and families. So my whole career has been dedicated to education due to my experiences in Head Start.
Thank you. And can we go to our next panelist?
I can go next. Hello,
Yes,
everyone.
please.
My name is Issa Njai. I'm the founder and executive director of West African Community Council. I founded West African Community Council in 2013 to create a support system for the West African community and other underserved communities as well. Our mission is to advocate, support, and empower the West African community and other underserved community while preserving our cultural and religious values. What brings me to this work is that I felt compelled as a second generation immigrant in the state of Washington. There was no support system for the West African community. So I felt like, the mission of the West African Community Council and my upbringing, there was some correlation, and somebody needed to step up and be that person to step up for the community through providing direct service. And as we go, I'll share more about my experience of what brings me to this role. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
Well, thank you for, I don't know if I'm out of order here, but my name is Luke Jasmine. And first off, I want to say, look at all the faces on here right now. It's so cool. This is Saturday, early in the morning, for some people. And just look at the sheer amount of numbers we have here. That's success to me. And this is what brings me to this work. And it's, if not us, then who? If not now, then when? And we live this every day, right? I mean, as a provider, for many years, I've seen parents not be able to afford high quality care, and teachers who are working hard every single day not get the wages and the compensation they deserve. So that's what drives me every day. And to be here in this space and see so many of you, it really encourages me, because it tells me I'm not alone, and that together, collectively, we can make sure that we have a space for all families, and we have a space for all children to grow. So thanks y'all for having me. I'm excited to be on this panel.
Thank you. Magali, excuse me.
Buenos dias. Good morning, everyone. I am happy to be here with you all on a Saturday morning. My name is Magali Solis. I am the Executive Director of La Casa Hogar. We are a nonprofit organization located in Yakima. We offer many educational opportunities to the Latino, Latinx community. We have an adult education program. We have an early learning center. And we also offer citizenship, education, and legal services. At La Casa Hogar, we believe that all people in our community deserve access to the skills and education they deserve to strengthen their families and their communities. Our mission work is centered around building confidence and self-empowerment to create systemic change for our resilient community. What drives me to this work is that I am a first-generation immigrant. I arrived to this country as a teenager, and I know firsthand what it's like to navigate the educational system in this country, all the challenges and all the struggles. After navigating the system, I successfully became a teacher. And at La Casa Hogar, I get to use many of the skills that I learned to support families in their journey to creating a better life for themselves and for their children. Working every day with resilient immigrant parents, striving to create a better future for themselves and their niños, their children, inspire me and motivates me to keep moving forward. Thank you.
Wow, that was awesome. The stories that you tell, why, how, and that you're continuing to go on. And it's all for making this a better place. Thank you so much. I'm going to go to the next question, which is, I heard your stories that you were all community leaders at some point. But how did you go from being a community leader to running an organization? That has to be hard. Can you each give us about 3 minutes on your response? And we can go in the same order too, that's okay, if whichever way you would like to go.
Thank you, Carolyn. I guess I'll start. Yeah, that is a very hard thing to do, particularly because if you want to start a nonprofit organization, there's a lot of more systemic problems and biases and issues you have to navigate in order to do the work you want to do, you're so passionate about. So it's not easy, but becoming a leader empowers yourself because you learn what is needed. You learn the voices of the parents. You know what to advocate for, and you get to know the issues that parents are experiencing. And with that, you're armed with that knowledge and with that that power to be able to create the type of services, the type of organization that you want to create that is needed. When we started Washington Family Engagement, I left my full-time job and needed to be there for the organization full-time, unpaid for a long time as a volunteer, to ensure that we create the type of organization, the anti-racist, the fair, the unbiased type of nonprofit organization that is needed in the state of Washington for family engagement. So we know there was a need in the state. Parents were telling us, where do they go if they want to just talk about family engagement? And that was a need. So the switch between being a community leader and a service provider to a nonprofit manager is hard. We're still experiencing all of the issues in this sector of nonprofits. So, but we are succeeding.
Thank you. Next.
In my experience, my work in the community started around 2000. But I thought, to be successful, I needed to undertake that body of work under a more structured platform like an organization. It's what motivated me to incorporate or create West African Community Council, if you will. And then the idea also is when the services are structured, there are ways to get the resources that are needed to accomplish what we set out to do. So naturally, doing things under the umbrella of an organization made perfect sense in order to be successful.
Thank you so much. Who'd like to go next?
Yeah, so for my story, this is Luke. I started, so I've been in early learning for a very long time, but owning Parkview, it's been about 9 years now. And when 9 years ago, one of the things that I realized, and we alluded to earlier, is I have enough funds to be able to pay my teachers what I thought they deserve, what they deserve in general for what they do every day. And if many of you who've been in this field for a while know that reimbursement rates were around 35% here in Spokane. And at that time, I started reaching out to other organizations, other centers across the state, and we all just unified around the idea and thought that there needs to be better. 35% of the market rate wasn't going to be enough for families and for our teachers. And since then, there's been a true embracement from the majority of these organizations that are here right now, and most importantly, legislators like Rep. Sen and Senator Clara Wilson, who will go out and will fight for us. And now we're at 85% of the market rate, all the way from 35%. So these are the type of things that brought me from community leader to running founding and running an organization like Washington Child Care Centers Association.
Thank you for that. Magali?
I want to start by telling you that in our community or in our county, Latinos make up over 50.7% of the population. And unfortunately, you will think that because of the numbers that we also hold leadership roles at the many local government levels or school districts, and that is not the reality. Internally, as an organization, 80% of our staff are immigrant women, and 66% of them started as adult students in the organization, and they've been growing in their leadership. So for our organization that has been in the community for over 33 years, it was really important that our leadership reflected not only who we are as an organization, but the community that we serve. So last year, we went through a leadership transition. We decided to do an internal process, and I became the first immigrant Latina woman to become the executive director of the organization in 33 years. It was a slow process. It took time and intentionality, but we needed to do this change because we see the importance of our stories and our identities being reflected in those that we serve. I get inspiration by the women, the powerful women in our community that I get to work with, and the many families that we serve as well. And the stepping into a leadership role is, it can feel scary and it can feel vulnerable, but doing little steps, sometimes showing up for a meeting when we know that we might be the only person of color, we are transforming we're transforming and we're creating the change that we need by elevating our voices. Thank you.
It sounds like the next step up from being a grassroots leader is founding your own organization. I know it's a lot of hard work, and that's what I'm hearing. It's a lot of work, but if you're truly passionate about it, it can and will be done. I appreciate all of you. You know, I just can't imagine starting my own organization. I just don't see it yet. But, you know, I want to say that, you know, these stories are really inspiring to all of us. And, you know, today we're in a room virtually with many, many community organizations. What can you tell us about your organization and the specialty it fits? And how do you rely on your networks and other organizations to advance your goals? I know that was a long question. Would you like to start us off, Addie?
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you, Caroline. You know, ever since my experience working for Head Start and then later on for preschools, as I was trying to support my college studies, and then later in the education, K-12 education system, I realized that what we need to do and don't do much of is listening to parents. It's the parent voices. That is critical to every type of work that we do, from preschool to K-12 to even to higher education. Parents know best. Parent wants the best. They want the best for their children. They are the experts on their kids, and there is so much leadership there that we do not discover because we're too busy doing other things and not listening to parents. So that is my niche. From the moment I started work in Head Start to now, my whole career has been on listening to parents and empowering, and getting my inspiration and my desire to wake up in the morning to do work is from parent voices, is what we hear from parents. And how many times we hear that they haven't been at the table when decisions, especially public policy decisions, have been made. They're not there. We assume, we presume, we know what they need, but parents have not been there. So the work ahead of us is focusing on parents, on leadership, on abilities that they need to develop. But at the same time, to advance our goals, we need to know and understand that they already have so much strength. They already know so many things we're not giving them credit for. So that helps me get up in the morning to continue the work.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that. Next.
So prior to addressing the portion of the questions that talks about network, I'd like to provide more information, background information about West African Community Council, the services that we provide. 3 main lines of services, one being immigration legal program to help folks gain legal status, to work and live in the US. And we also have an early learning program serving kids that are aged 0 to 5 to promote early brain development. We also have a family support program in which we support parents with parenting the way in the US, and also connecting them with resources. In order for us to be successful in those undertakings, we thought, joining several networks would make perfect sense. Today, West African Community Council sits at several tables, and we use those networks and other organizations, if you will, to tap into other resources, promote our events, promotional materials, and also inquire about funding and so many other things. We are aware of that alone we cannot do this work. Therefore, partnership is a must.
Well,
okay, I'm sorry. Thank you for that. I'm sorry about that, Luke. This is just so inspirational listening to you. And after everyone's done talking, I'm gonna tell you what I truly got out of this. Go ahead, Luke. Thank you.
Yeah, so to answer the question of what is my niche and where do I rely on my network? So it's twofold. Through Washington Child Care Centers Association, the niche is making sure that the people who are doing the logistics every single day, they're delivering the services, have voice, they have a seat at the table, and they're seeing policies to really help them be able to not only pay teachers, but also make sure that there's access and affordability for parents. So that's one aspect. But looking deeper into my role at Parkview Early Learning Center, one of the things throughout the years I've been seeing is that parents need voice, the teachers need voice, and creating mechanisms to be able to magnify that. This is what this group is doing here, giving those people who use the services, those people who are, again, delivering those services, to have a seat at the table so that what comes out of legislation really meets the goals that we all have.
Thank you. Magali?
Well, Advocacy Hogar our specialty, I think it's building relationships and connection with the families that we serve by creating and offering a safe space. Like in the back, you can see a photo of the organization. It's a house, and it's a house intentionally, located at in a location that is accessible and where families feel comfortable, women feel comfortable coming to the organization, not only to receive the education that they are seeking, but also as a way of connecting with other women in a safe and comfortable space, centering the voices of the people that are most impacted, and then being able to offer opportunities for them to connect where they can elevate and advocate for the things that they want for themselves and their families. So serving as a connector as well it's something that we offer this community as well. And networks are key for doing our work. In order to have to remove all the barriers for our community to be able to access early childhood education. We need to do that as a community. It's the responsibility of everyone in our community to be able to remove these barriers and to create that access. So we do a lot of that connection and self-finding, supporting families, parents to find their voices in order to advocate for what they need.
Thank you. I appreciate all of you. We have a question in the chat for each one of you. And the question is, and it's from Cecilia. The question is, what is the biggest challenge that you've had to face? And just tell it all, because we want to hear it.
Okay, I can start. I imagine it's a challenge to start our organizations. That's what the question is about. Well, to find anyone who believes in what we wanted to do, to find funds. Very, very few people, and I think all of my nonprofit leaders, fellow leaders here in this call will say that there's not a whole lot of funders for parents. I mean, the development of parents, in our case, we develop parents, we empower parents. That's a hard sell for many funders. So in the beginning, we were knocking on many doors, and the doors were not opening for us to get funds because there were not a lot of believers that this is a true need. We all know that, of course, there are many, many other needs that our families have, including basic needs. But empowerment and, helping parents get a better life, better jobs, better futures, education, and all of that was, at least when we started over 7 years ago, was a hard sell. So yes, the biggest challenge was, and I think it has improved tremendously nowadays, is to convince funders that we need funds to develop, help, and grow our parents into leaders, parents of color into leaders. So that's my my take on that one.
Thank you. Next.
For me, my biggest challenge has been and is today to address the growing requests for affordable housing. It's something that we don't have the bandwidth, the capacity to do so. But here at West African Community Council, we want to be very strategic. And when we started the work, this body of work, we did a needs assessment. Immigration support was big on the list. Early learning was big, and affordable housing came next. So I'm hoping I'm working with other partners to address that, but the community has been pushing us for affordable housing. Why such and such communities are getting that, whereas the West African community is not getting that. But we are our own advocates. We have to advocate for ourselves. I've been telling the community to be patient, one thing at a time. I want to be successful in what we have already done before addressing other needs.
Thank you very much. Next.
Well, so along with funding, I agree with funding and representation, equity. I would say the next biggest thing that's been hard is, look, we are in the middle of a pandemic. 2020 was a very tough year for all of us. Everything is interconnected. And to me, a lot of times, we're just trying to live the next day. We're just trying to pay the next bill. So what that means is getting accurate information out and getting good mobilization is a lot harder because the collective capacity is lower. So if there is a way that we can continue to encourage each other to continue to give each other accurate information in small, digestible ways so that we all can have a call to action as well. That's how I see us remedying that. But yeah, I mean, capacity is one of the biggest hurdles.
Thank you. Magali?
Yes. Well, as I was mentioning earlier, like the importance of representative leadership, and I think it has been repeated here, how we all understand, we all that are here, I'm sure that understand that parents know best, children know best what they need. And our organization in connecting parents with opportunities for them to be able to share their opinions or their or to advocate for the need that they the change that they need. We oftentimes see how the spaces are not ready for parents. The assumption is that the parent will accommodate to the space. It's not, we are going to change how we're managing our meetings or handling our meetings, not only just, not only offering interpretation, but that really we're gonna make this have this conversation in a way that is more welcoming and accessible for the parents that we're trying to engage or the community that we're trying to engage. It's with that assumption that they need to adapt. And we see a lot of just frustration when we're encouraging and going with parents to meetings, because then they feel like they're not being engaged or they're not being listened to. And I think that that has a really negative impact in their confidence, because it took for them so much to just take the first step to go to show up for that meeting, even though they knew that they were going to feel intimidated and afraid. But because there was a support, there was a group, and we went together. And then feeling like I'm here, but no one is listening to me, or I don't understand what they're saying because I haven't been offered context about this conversation, or I am invited to offer my opinion on an agenda that has already been created, but no one asked me what were the important things for me to add to that agenda. So those are, I think, the challenges sometimes that our team faces, and just the struggles that we face as we seek to increase that representative leadership and to elevate the voices of the parents and community that we serve. Thank you.
Thank you. All I can say is, wow. I want to say funding, empowerment, language, persistence, power in numbers, bring parents to the table. We have lived experiences. And last but not least, never give up. Thank you so much. I appreciate all of our talks that we had so far. I want to say thank you to Addie, Isa, Luke, Magali, for being with us today. We've learned so much and are excited to continue work alongside of you. We will now take a quick break for lunch. Please return back at 12:20 and you can have your lunch in hand if needed. I appreciate our panelists. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Amazing, yes. Enjoy your lunch.
and then I'm going to go to the room and record it.
Great. Well, we ready to roll here? Sounds great. So welcome back, everyone. We're really excited to continue with the afternoon. I'm Alex Hannell, and I'm Mobilization Manager with ChildCare Aware of Washington. And before I continue, I want to throw it to our other co-host for this training, Catherine.
Hi, excuse me. Hi, I'm Catherine. I'm a parent ambassador alumni, an ECAP parent, a WASA board member. But most of all, I'm a concerned parent, and just like most of you. So
I really appreciated what was mentioned in an earlier panel about how one of the big obstacles for folks getting more involved as an advocate is getting over the jargon and getting over the vocabulary and all of these terms that can be new. So if you're in this session today, we're going to dive into all of that and really dive in deep to some of those terms and ideas and processes so that we can leave this weekend and feel a lot more comfortable taking that next step, joining other events or groups or moving forward. But before we do that, I just want to throw a huge thank you and shout out to our interpreter team again. Please put your applause emojis up. They're often the unsung heroes of making movements like this that we're building for early learning strong and inclusive and widespread. So just thank you again for all of that work. So I'm going to attempt to share my screen here, and someone please let me know if this isn't coming across correct. Ideally, you're seeing just a PowerPoint slide.
I can see it. Looks good.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
So we'll dive in. If we are speaking too fast for anyone in any part of this, please do not hesitate to speak up and ask us to slow down. And without that, let's get started. So what is advocacy? There we go. Today, we're going to talk about what advocacy is. Again, like I said, all these basic concepts and cover some terminology in Government 101 to move forward. So just off the bat, defining the keyword here. Oh, and this is not my slide. Sorry, Catherine.
it's okay. It's quite all right. So as he said, advocacy is any way that you speak to others to advance your cause. So think like if you're on social media, when you ask for a babysitter, that's advocating for your cause. So it's any way we use the power that we have to influence who has resources, who has power, and who can access the important information.
So, and right off the bat, just having that key definition in mind, I just want to address kind of one of the most common misconceptions, at least I see about advocacy, and that is that advocacy is complicated. And I totally appreciate when people think that. I know when we think about advocacy, one of the first things we think about is politics. Or government or Washington, D.C. And all of that can be difficult and that can be messy. But the big message we want to share today or encourage you to share with others who are starting as advocates is that that's only 10%. Like Catherine just said, 90% of what being an advocate entails is really straightforward. It's just how you talk with others to improve a mission or advance a cause or make change. So with that in mind, as we're talking today, we're going to kind of use two different terms to talk about advocacy. We might say big A advocacy or capital A advocacy, and that's going to refer to advocacy specifically in politics. And then little a advocacy is what we're going to use to refer to advocacy in our everyday life.
So what what it really looks like is in our everyday life, we share about work with our neighbors. We help friends find childcare for their families. We post about childcare on social media, like I said. We also write letters to the editor, make phone calls. In politics, we are writing our legislators, attending city council meetings, testifying at bill hearings, also writing letters to the editor. That's a big thing for advocacy. At work, we give tours. You can give tours of your center if you're a parent. I've invited my representatives, I'm in District 39, to our ECAP site, promoting open childcare slots, providing additional opportunities for staff.
And now that we've covered kind of the basics of what advocacy is, why should we be doing this? I think one thing, I know there's many different facets to what makes up early learning, but one thing that probably we all have in common is that if we're connected to or working in early learning, we probably don't have a lot of spare time on our hands. Children can be exhausting. So is it worth our time to do this? And as you probably expect, our answer is yes. Why is it important to advocate little a in our everyday lives? First and foremost, I think it's because we know that early education, early learning impacts everyone. Positive early learning experiences are the best things that we can give to children for brain development to impact the rest of their life. And as we've seen throughout the pandemic, and as we saw before, but is becoming more wider known, if there isn't a strong early learning system, the entire country suffers. If parents can't rely on quality early learning opportunities for their kids, it's harder to get back to work. It's harder for the economy to move forward. Childcare and early learning is everywhere. So it's important that we're active in ensuring that we're doing everything we can to make the system strong. And then in politics, why is it important we spend time advocating in the political process? First and foremost, and I know it's kind of cliche, but we've got to remember that legislators work for us. They get their job because we vote for them. We're the bosses and they're the employees. And I thought that Representative Sen spoke to that really well this morning. And as she also mentioned, people here with the lived experience and the expertise, we probably know more about early learning than anyone in the legislature does. So thinking about that, if we are the bosses and they work for us, we need to be good managers. If you work as a manager yourself, you probably know you can't expect your employees to do well if you never show up and you never communicate with them. So if we want to expect them to make the right choices for our early learning system, it's on us to help inform what that looks like. We're the experts, so we have a really important role to play in that.
So advocacy versus lobbying. So advocacy is, it's speaking to others to advance your cause. It's personal. Lobbying is, speaking to elected officials about specific policies and urging votes for or against. So for it to be lobbying, it has to contain all three elements. For like a nonprofit angle for advocacy, they advocate for like early childhood. WAFI or Washington Family Engagement advocates for family engagement and family empowerment.
And we heard from a lot of nonprofit community leaders earlier, and as someone who also works for a nonprofit, I understand and appreciate the concerns that come up around lobbying. There's restrictions on what people in nonprofits can and can't do with lobbying to maintain their 501c3 status. But one thing that's also important to remember is that according to the IRS, nonprofits can lobby as long as it doesn't become an undue part of their activities. So while we're not going to go too deep into the details of that, the important message is advocacy and lobbying go hand in hand, and they're both activities we can all participate in. So who do we advocate to then? What does this look like when we're going out and taking action? We'll advocate a lot in early learning to elected officials, as you'd expect. We heard from some of them this morning, and that's around building, stronger laws and policies. But again, importantly, and we can't repeat this enough, we need to advocate to everyone else as well. Anyone who supports a cause. Advocacy does not require laws or policies. And some of the most important work we can do in advocacy is not speaking directly to a legislator per se, but speaking to others that we know to help build a movement, make it larger, and make it stronger. So we're going to now dive into kind of the school section of the training. Like we mentioned, one of the hardest parts of getting involved in early learning advocacy or advocacy of any type is just getting over that hurdle of the jargon. There's a lot of specific terms and vocab that sometimes mean similar things, sometimes mean different, sometimes are misunderstood. So our goal for today is to leave feeling more comfortable with the knowledge to take that next step, feel more comfortable having conversations with other advocates, feel more comfortable attending a hearing that we heard about earlier and following what's going on. So to start, let's talk about bills, laws, and acts. These are three terms that are probably well known to most people here, but they're terms that sometimes you see used interchangeably when sometimes they shouldn't. So it's just important to get the nuances. A bill is introduced legislation that's not yet passed. So a bill is something that lives in the legislative branch. Representative Sen and Senator Wilson, who we met earlier, work on bills. And when a bill gets passed, that's when it becomes an act. So all acts were bills at some point, but not every bill becomes an act. And then an act is a word you'll see that is used interchangeably with laws. An act is a law of the land. But another important thing, and I appreciate that this might be pretty self-evident to most, laws you'll see in the technical sense used to refer to one specific act or a body of acts, multiple acts that all work in the same world. So a good example is our tax law. There isn't just one single act that lays out all of the tax law in Washington. It's multiple acts that come together to form the tax law. But for our purposes, we really focus on bills when we're advocating to influence the language in them and influence if they pass or not.
So there's three branches to the government, as most know. There's the legislative, which creates laws, and that's what Senator Wilson and Representative Sen were talking about this morning with the Fair Start for Kids Act. That's what they did. The executive branch approves, implements, and enforces it. So when the law gets passed and signed into, that's what that is. And then the judicial determines if laws are constitutional. So if somebody doesn't like it, they can go file a lawsuit, as we've seen lots this last couple of years. And then it goes to court and decides if it's constitutional.
So diving in detail, you'll see a lot of the work we do in political advocacy and early learning focuses on the legislative branch. And that's because that's where we as advocates have the most ability to influence the language that are in these bills before they become laws. So the folks who make up the legislative branch are elected legislators, and a legislator being someone who is elected by the people to represent their district in the House or Senate. Just before going on, I'm going to ask everyone to please put themselves in mute as we continue. Much appreciated. So in Washington, there are 49 different legislative districts. So people within each of these 49 districts come together and vote in our elections to see who's going to represent their needs, their problems, their issues, their community in the government. Within the legislative branch, we have the House of Representatives and the Senate. The House in Washington, each district sends 2 representatives to the House of Representatives. So I myself live in Seattle, which when I go to vote, I vote for one of 2 people who will go to the House to represent me. And then in the Senate, on the Senate side, using the same 49 districts, each district will send 1 senator. At the federal level, it's a little bit different. In the Senate, each state will elect 2 senators, and those are elected statewide. So my vote in Seattle will go towards the same election that someone's vote out in Yakima will, where in the House of Representatives at the federal level, that's divided proportionally by population for each state. So larger states like Washington, like California, will send more representatives to the House than smaller states like, let's say, Maine. And then a final term you'll hear a lot too is constituents. And that's refers to the individuals who live in one of these 49 districts that vote for legislators, and that's the voters.
So we have our executive branch, which is our governor and our president. They're elected by state, by entire state and country. They sign the bills into law. Excuse me, sorry. They make proposals for budgets and laws, but they don't write the bills. And then you have the Department of Children, Youth, and Families, DYCF, which you'll hear a lot in advocacy circles. They're a state government department that implements childcare legislation. So they're part of the executive branch of government. So they report to the governor, which in effect, we approach them a little bit differently when we advocate, which we'll talk about later. And then there, for Washington State, we have the governor, which is Jay Inslee, the head of state executive branch. He enforces Washington state laws, vetoes laws passed by the legislature. So, and in Washington state, we have what's called a line item veto. So it's very unique, and they can, he can veto just part of a law instead of all of it. So he's done that a couple times. He commands the National Guard. We have our lieutenant governor. So he's like the vice president, but in Washington, they're not running mates. So you vote for them separately, and they can actually be from separate parties. State executive branch officials are elected. Federal level officials are appointed.
All right, so we've got a lot of the building blocks out of the way. So now we're going to jump into the legislative process and walk through all of the different steps that it takes for an idea to become a bill, to become a law, with a special emphasis on where we as advocates can most strategically lend our expertise to influence this process. So if one term we talked about a lot today is legislative session, and that's the period of time where our legislators all get together. Before the pandemic, it would be physically get together in the Capitol. Now, as we heard earlier, it's over Zoom. But this is when the work of introducing, debating, and passing bills to turn them into laws is done. So you'll see that from spring to December, legislative session begins in January. How long it is depends on the year. But importantly, from spring to December, that's when our legislators are normally back in their districts. And that's when they work to develop ideas and start to draft bill text. So when session begins, bills are introduced by legislators, and to pass, they have to go through 3 different votes. The legislature is broken into different committees. Both the House and the Senate have their different committees, but a bill will normally need to pass through 2 different types of committees before it can get voted for approval. The first is normally referred to as a policy committee. So this is a smaller group of legislators whose job is to focus on if a bill is a good idea for a certain theme. So for early learning, those committees are the House Early Learning and Human Services Committee, and then the Senate has two, the Early Learning and K-12, as well as the Human Services and Corrections. And their job is not to think about the price of a bill, not to think about how it's going to be paid for. They don't think about taxes. They really focus in on, is this a good idea for Washington's children? So a majority of that committee will need to vote in favor for a bill to pass. And once that happens, it goes to the Fiscal Committee, which you can see also listed here. The House Appropriations and the Senate Ways and Means. And they think less about, is this bill good for Washington's children, and more about, can we afford it? How do we pay for it? Do the funds exist? Do we need to find the funds elsewhere? They're more on the money side. And then finally, once a bill passes there, it goes to the entire chamber floor. And so we kind of saw one group decides, is this a good idea for kids? One decides, can we pay for it? Then when it goes to the chamber floor, every single legislator gets to vote. And this is where we see, does all of Washington support this idea? Now, once a bill goes through that complicated process in one house, it needs to do the exact same thing in the other. So if our bill passes the policy, fiscal, and chamber votes in the House, it then needs to go to the Senate and pass 3 more there. Once that finally happens, the bill will be sent to the governor, who will have the ability to either sign it and approve it. That's when that bill will become an act, or the governor can veto it. And then from spring to summer, the the executive branch, so again, DCYF, is charged with implementing whatever that new law is. So as advocates in early learning, we see different areas where we can target, we want to target the right people. We want to make sure if we're spending time sharing our stories, we're making the most impact possible. And some of the ways we do that are by targeting individuals who work on policy committees, because they're the ones who really are focused on if something helps our children or not. And we'll also target legislators in the spring through December to help them develop ideas, help them draft texts. Legislators and their offices will often rely on advocates to really sort through the details of, is this idea correct? Does this address the problems that you're seeing, living day to day in the early learning world? And for the state budget, there is a similar long, complicated process. You'll see that in September, state agencies will submit budget requests to the governor. So the relevant state agency for a lot of early learning work would be the Department of Children, Youth, and Families. So they'll, along with every other agency in Washington, will submit their requests for funding. And then that leaves the governor with several months to take all of these proposals into account and create his budget. As we learned earlier, the executive branch does not write, they approve. And that's fairly similar for the budget, like it is for laws. But in this case, the governor's office will often write their own budget proposal, which is a signal to the legislature of, the legislature, that you need the governor's signature to approve what you create. So this is us signaling what priorities the governor's office has. So the House and Senate will see the governor's proposals, but will also write their own budgets and come together from March to April to debate and pass those. When we get to around April of each year, the legislature and the governor then get together to negotiate what will be the final budget. And once that all comes into place, the legislature gets to write the final budget, which the governor can then sign into approval. And that budget will then take place as of July 1st. So again, all very complicated processes and things that I think even the more experienced early learning advocates here today would say are, we're always still learning more about how these processes run and how we can best get involved. But the budget is where a lot of strong and important funding for early learning can come from. So we all work together and coordinate to target the right agencies to share how we think funding should be prioritized, to target the right individuals in the House and Senate to do the same for their budgets, et cetera. anything else you want to add there, Catherine? I know I just talked for a long time.
Yeah, this is a great time to get involved with emails, calling, setting up meetings, letters to the editor, testifying. These budgets affect your kids, so this is the best time to really get involved.
So to wrap up this training, we're gonna end with looking at long and short-term advocacy. So when we're speaking to others to advance a cause, the cause of early learning, what are we focusing on in the short term and what are we focusing on in the long term? This is, where we move from talking about what is advocacy to thinking about how can we be strategic and maximize our impact.
So the short-term focus is on now, targets legislators, DCYF administrators, local community leaders, office managers. The goals are immediate actions, emergency orders, line item funding, rule changes, actions. You can attend hearings, request meetings, submit grants, letters to the editors.
Oh. And then looking at the long term, our goals are less, when we're thinking long-term strategically, it's less about, what issue exists right now that we need to address. And it's more about how does the system at large need to change, or how can we grow and strengthen our movement? But as you'll kind of see looking at this slide, the targets and the goals and the actions are largely the same. We target legislators and administrators, we target local community leaders, our coworkers. The goals, again, affordability, pay parity, the cultural attitude towards early learning. And we do a lot of the same actions. It's attending hearings, requesting meetings, submitting grant proposals. But the important thing to think about or keep in mind is always what's the immediate problem we're trying to fix. And as we're crafting a solution, is our solution also helping grow the movement in the long run? Is this something that helps us just now? Or can this help us now and also in 10 years? It's keeping the eye on the prize, for lack of a worse cliche.
There's a question in the chat from somebody.
Ooh, how the current situation with COVID can affect the budget of early learning. Create the emergency on my representative to pass the bill, adding the current situation. So that is a great question. And I don't want to give any false information here. I myself am not a budget expert. And I think for this training, really want to just focus in on building these, foundational skills for advocacy. But what I would say is we're going to have a ton of opportunities during legislative session to attend hearings about budgets in the legislature. And that's where you can go and share your experiences as a early learning professional or someone, on the front lines of, either this work as a provider or a parent or administrator. And just impress upon the legislators the urgency of the need and share what problems you face and how you think the solutions will best be, can best be implemented. So stay in touch with all the organizations here today, because we're going to be busy on email and social media, sharing all of these opportunities as they come up.
So it works. And I got to participate last year, so it was an amazing year. Policy victories last year were increasing working connections childcare rates to the 65th percentile, $32 million, creating community-based pathways for providers to meet education requirements, $500,000, expanding supports for dual language programs, $250,000, expanding the homeless grace period from 4 to 12 months, that's $1.9 million, expanding supports for FFN caregivers, That's 250,000. Creating mental health consultation for licensed programs, increasing the subsidy rate for children in foster care, 575,000. Enhanced rate now helps them better get placed into programs. Brought down the EA scholarship waitlist and invested in future scholars, 3.6 million. Investments in scholarships, technical assistance, and licensing remediation to help FCCs meet new WACs, 3 million. Over 40 million invested in the child care system across the short session. And I have to tell you, it was amazing to watch so many parents come together and work on this. And Representative Sen and Senator Wilson were so amazing and so patient and so humble with all of us parents. So it was just an amazing experience.
And then in 2021, we saw, equally large, if not even larger victories as well. We've talked a lot about the Fair Start for Kids Act, which has been one of the largest investments in Washington's childcare in decades, and is, we just talked about short-term and long-term advocacy. And that has been a great example of how, nearly 2 decades of small victories have built upon each other to allow us to make really systemic level change in 2021. There's also the tax on extraordinary wealth from capital gains that is going to help fund childcare in the state for years to come. And in the state budget, we also advocated in that complicated process, we being not just the organizations present, but countless just individuals who took it upon themselves to attend hearings or, tag their legislators in social media posts or send letters. All of it is to say the time we invest in this does pay off. So we only have about a few minutes before I pass it back to Catherine. So just to share that all of the resources you see here, we will share in follow-up emails so that you have all the materials. But yeah.
And I just want to add that the tax that we've advocated for only affects about less than 1,000 families here in Washington and will benefit pretty much everybody. So this is how to communicate with your elected officials. You can write your legislators. There's a link on here. I can't access it to get to the where you can find where your legislators are, and that's really important to know what district you're in and who to talk to, because those are the first people you go to when you want to advocate for something. And remember, you're the expert, so have it written down who you are, where you're from, what are you asking for, and why is your request important? We call it your story. Everyone has a story.
And just to echo what Representative Sen shared us this morning, hearing from legislators directly, the data is important for sure, but it's often not the data or the reports or the spreadsheets that stick in a legislator's mind. It's the stories directly from people in their own communities that really make a difference. So whether you consider yourself a strong public speaker or not, whether you consider yourself a strong writer or not, you have a really important role to play. And just sharing your experiences, however you're comfortable, is always a good step to take and always has a lot of power.
And let me add a little secret. Your Zoom background, you can make it anything. Usually I have my kids up there, and when I testify, and I've had Representatives Sen actually commented one time on how cute my kids were, and other senators have commented. So put your kids up there. They love seeing your families. That's what you're advocating for. Put them right in their face.
So just want to check in with our organizers. Is our other group coming back to us, or
yes, in just a minute, so we can see if there's any more questions while they wrap up, because we'll just stay here. So
great. I will stop the share. Looking at the chat, copy of the slide act. If you, we'll be sending out all these resources via the email you use to register. So you can expect those there.
Anybody can contact me anytime. I'll help them write their story. You can practice with me. I've been there. Ask April. I told her I didn't have a story. She reminds me every day I have a story.
I think the last thing I would add before the rest of the group is here is, maybe a lot of this information is stuff that you're already familiar with or is already well known, but I think anyone who's been doing early learning advocacy for a while will tell you that there are more people than you expect who are not as comfortable with some of these topics as you might be. So even if you didn't necessarily learn a lot during this presentation, one thing, the reason why we always try to, give trainings like this is to help reinforce that we all can take this information and share it with others. The best way to bring more people through into these movements is not through necessarily someone like me sending out cold emails, but through people hearing from their friends, from their family members, from their neighbors. So I hope you either learned a lot here or you at least got a good refresher so that you're confident and committed to taking this knowledge to other people. And I see the group will be back in about a minute. So thank you, everyone.
Yes, as April just said, please join the parent ambassadors. It's an amazing, amazing, life-changing program. And I gained a family that I never had. So please, please join.
All right, it looks like the majority of our folks are back here in the main room. So if you missed it in the chat, please remember to reselect your language preference if you haven't already. And I'm gonna pass things on to Carolyn.
Well, welcome back, everybody. I hope you got the opportunity to learn a lot, or at least get a lot out of it. Just remember, advocacy is the way. We are now going to be hearing from our community leaders, like yourself, about their journey and what brings them to fight for a better early learning system. I have with me today Cecilia, Sakura, Patty, and Megan, who are all grassroots leaders. We will be hearing from them now. Just like our panelists earlier, We will be asking them a series of questions. If you have any questions that you'd like to ask them, please write it in the chat. And hopefully we'll be able to go back to some of them in the end. First, we'll be hearing from Cecilia. And the first question is, we spent a lot of time today hearing and learning about where the early learning system is now. But can you all introduce yourselves and share a little bit about the vision you see for your community? And please allow yourself 2 minutes to answer. Thank you.
Gracias, Caroline. Buenas tardes a todos. Mi nombre es Cecilia González. Vivo en la comunidad de Yakima. La visión que tengo para mi comunidad de Yakima es la oportunidad de acceder a la educación de aprendizaje temprano para todos y cada uno de los niños, independientemente de sus antecedentes. Visualizo los niños que ingresen al kinder con una base sólida en la educación formal, listos para tener éxito, listos para prosperar. Visualizo a los niños que entran al kindergarten con una base sólida y junto con esto visualizo un proceso rápido, equitativo, accesible y sin barreras para las familias cuando inscriben a sus hijos en los centros de educación infantil. Para lograr esta visión, primero visualizo que el estado de Washington podría establecer programas de educación preescolar en todas las escuelas primarias y convertirlo en un requisito para que todos los niños de la comunidad accedan a esta educación. Thank you.
Thank you, Cecilia. And who would like to go next? I'll leave it up in the air. Okay, Sakura. Would you like to go next?
Sure.
Thank you.
So hi, my name is Sakura, and I'm a former educator and current nanny. And I'm also a fellow for OneAmerica. So I help to organize for OneAmerica's early education and childcare laws that we're trying. So my vision for early is pretty, early childhood education and early learning is pretty broad, obviously, because I've been an educator myself. But some of the things that are important to me is for all children to have equitable access to food through their educational structure. Pre-K learning before age 5 that is low cost and or free. Access to education, even if they don't speak English. And increase support for kids who are neurodiverse or have additional needs. I also want to add more on a personal note, like also access to art and music in every school. And I think that should be completely funded. It shouldn't have to be up to PTAs to fund those sort of programs for kids. Because we've all learned, I think, how important art and music is for children. But yeah, so those are just some of, I know it's sort of a lot, but those are some of the visions that I have for early childhood and early learning.
Thank you for that. I think all those things are very, very important. And so should we go with our last person, I believe it is? Is it Megan? Okay, great.
Hi, my name is Megan and I'm in Spokane, Washington, and I'm the co-founder and lead organizer and director for a grassroots movement called All of Us or None. And we are organized under Legal Services for Prisoners with Children. I'm a teen mother. I was at one time a teen mother. I'm now an old mom. And I'm a formerly incarcerated parent. And our movement moves to work for full restoration of our rights. And sometimes we don't think about a right until we don't have it, like a right for fair housing or a right for employment, a right to be able to be interviewed without having to check a box before you even see my face, a right to access my children because I'm the expert on them in public schools. So the vision that I see, I should say, out of that grassroots movement, we recently founded a community bail fund and a peer navigation. So the vision that I see is that we would have peers that are navigating other peers. And out of that navigation, we would see more than equity. We would see anti-racism. We have a lot of talk about giving everybody equity, but what we need to talk about more is anti-racism. And we need to acknowledge that it is present and work to do away with what is present. So that's mostly my vision. I have 5 children. My oldest is in his 30s now, dating myself. And then my youngest is now in 2nd grade. 4 of my children were adopted through the foster care system. So I overcame systemic barriers to become licensed to foster and adopt. And having access to Head Start and ECAP and the peers, the family support inside of that program helped me when I was a mom in my 40s. I kind of walked into Head Start and ECAP like a required thing that had to be done. And once I got there, my family support helped me, and I was able to purchase the home that I'm living in. And it wasn't even a goal that I had. So that's my vision, is that we see a whole community that joins together to do this peer work together.
Thank you very much for that. And we have Patty. Would you like to share, please?
Yeah, thank you for having me. My name is Patty Liu. I'm a working mom in Seattle. I am a Risers Fellow through MomsRising. And I guess my background is that, when the pandemic hit and childcare and school closed, because I wasn't able to devote my full hours to my job, I was laid off. And so that kind of rip in the fabric of our reality really exposed where all the fabric was threadbare. Parents really rely on schools and childcare, not just to be able to get their work done if they're working parents, but also like to give kids that enrichment of, social, emotional learning. And just to piggyback on what Megan said, absolutely, one of my visions for my community is to provide our children with valuable anti-racism education. Those I think are very, very important aspects of, why we send our kids to early learning centers and to daycare, preschools. It's not just so that we can work, it's so that they can have that richness of creating relationships with their peers and other adults.
Thank you. I like all that. This is so enriching, listening to their thoughts, everything that they have to say. We're going to move to the next question. And I want to say that the visions, I like all of your visions, the things you have, the peer-to-peer, fair housing, making the community whole. That is so important for our children, very important. So I can definitely see how you're working together to accomplish this. My next question for all of you is, why and how you have grown as a leader in your journey as an advocate. You have 3 minutes each. And believe you me, we are all ears. We want to hear. Thank you. And whoever wants to go first.
Me gustaría ir primero. I would like to go first. It's a good question. Muy buena pregunta. ¿Por qué? Porque es una necesidad, porque tenemos que actuar por nuestros niños, porque los niños son nuestro futuro y porque si no vemos a nuestros niños como personas importantes que liderarán nuestra comunidad en el futuro y no invertimos o abogamos por ellos, yo creo entonces que estaremos siendo negligentes con ellos y negligentes con nuestra comunidad. ¿Por qué? Porque como soy una mamá con experiencias de tener un hijo en preescolar y tener un hijo que no estuvo en preescolar, Podría ser una larga lista de diferencias y el impacto en su trayectoria educativa. ¿Y por qué? Porque soy miembro de una organización, la Casa Hogar, que se enfoca en las fortalezas de la comunidad y busca eliminar las barreras que enfrentan las familias todos los días en el sistema de educación infantil. Respondiendo cómo, primero tuve que reconocer que como mamá soy la primera y la más importante maestra de mis hijos. Así comenzó mi jornada. Como mamá, al ser voluntaria en el preescolar de mi hijo, cuando estaba en un preescolar, ahora ya terminó su carrera y tiene una vida feliz y saludable. Luego, usando mi voz para hablar cuando algo no es justo o cuando algo está mal o cuando la educación preescolar de un niño se retrasa en las prioridades del sistema educativo. Luego se me presentó la oportunidad de compartir mi experiencia personal con organizaciones de defensa de los niños como Children's Alliance. Más adelante en mi jornada comencé a facilitar reuniones familiares para compartir sobre la educación para el aprendizaje temprano y para el desarrollo infantil. Me considero un recurso para las familias cuando necesitan alzar la voz para defender la educación de sus hijos. No hablo por ellos, solo estoy aquí para apoyarlas para que puedan alzar sus propias voces. Dentro de la jornada, he visitado el Capitolio en Olimpia varias veces, abogando por la educación del aprendizaje temprano. Y ahora estoy participando en diferentes comités, coaliciones, hermandades, conferencias y eventos. Y por supuesto, todos los días tomo las acciones que necesito tomar para defender la educación de nuestros niños, incluida la abogacía por los niños, las familias, el acceso al cuidado y aumentar las oportunidades educativas y de desarrollo para los proveedores de cuidado infantil. Incluye también el abogar por el aumento al acceso a los recursos para todos los maestros de la primera infancia y promover la justicia y la equidad social y racial. En pocas palabras, mi viaje comenzó primero como madre, luego como maestra de aprendizaje temprano y ahora como líder y movilizadora comunitario para el cambio en el sistema educativo que sea justo y equitativo para todos. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Next.
All right. Well, I think at least for me, my advocacy has sort of helped to highlight the inequities that I've seen in various communities of color, especially when it pertains to children. And becoming a leader meant that I started to sort of directly address these inequities with this sort of greater understanding and empathy. So by advocating for these communities and like linking them to the resources that they needed or handing out mutual aid, I've learned how to get various people or kids or communities the things they needed without actually having that many resources or that much money myself, because most of the work I've been doing has been, you know, individually on my own or with my community's help. And so what I found is that the things or the help that people need exist out in the world. And so sometimes it's even just like, you know, collecting different organizations and the resources or the services that they provide, and connecting those resources to the people who actually need them or the kids who need them. And so I think one thing that I've learned is, you know, being a leader and advocating for the kids in my community, it's been a really big exercise, not just in helping people directly, but like in networking, and collecting and distributing information. Because once you connect people to what they need, then you can help to get the ball rolling on getting them that help faster. And, you know, whatever helps their lives more directly, you know, that they didn't know about before. And so I think really, as I've grown as like a leader, I've seen myself less as like a third party observer and I've started to get more directly involved, especially with kids. So I think that's really helped to grow my advocacy, is realizing that I am self-empowered to help get people the things they need, especially kids, because I know everyone in this room cares so much about the kids in our community.
Thank you. I like that very much. I really do. Okay, Megan.
I think for me, the why did I step up, or why did I agree to move into the space? I was attending a leadership training years ago, and the person who was facilitating the training, and it was a training for directly impacted people who'd been impacted by incarceration. And he said to us, if there's a need in your community and it's not being met and it's bothering you, then you should be bothered enough to meet that need. And I really thought about it and thought, there's groups in our community, but there wasn't a group that was directly addressing our access to our children and what was happening to us when we come home from incarceration or even while we're gone. And so I stepped into that space, and then to really be a good leader, you have to learn who to follow. And I'd worked in the corporate world before, and mostly in sales and as sales training. And when you want to become a good salesman, you follow what the good salesmen do. And if you want to become a good salesman for a long time, you follow what the ethical salesmen do, the ones that have ethics and morals and values. And so I found people whose values were the same as mine and had the same ethics. And for me, fortunately, that was other parents who'd been marginalized in some way, maybe not the same way that I had been, but they'd also been marginalized. So I stepped in with them, and together we just continue to move. And I agree with what Sakura said. We exist, our nonprofit exists as a connector. We don't really offer direct services except for our peer services. But what our peers do is connect you to another resource. So a lot of times in my community, everything I had was here. I didn't have access to it, or I didn't know that it was there. Just like purchasing this home before the whole housing crisis hit, I didn't know that there was things available to me until I talked to my person at ECAP, and she was like, try this, try that. So I think that the biggest why is our kids and our families and how we've been impacted directly. And the biggest how is everybody else, is all of us moving together. And I think we just talked with Katie about the Fair Start for Kids Act and how all of that work started maybe back in the early 2000s. And, I was a teen mom, and now I'm a mom who's almost 50. And so looking at that, I think it's our dual responsibility to continue to bring in parents, grandparents, guardians, educators, everyone in the system, because we hear a lot that our system is broken, but our system is not broken. It's actually doing what it was built to do. We have to make the choice to make some breaks into what's going on in our world. So that's the big why and the how for me. And I hope that I always follow instead of try to lead. And then I'm always listening to those around me so that I know where to follow too.
Snaps on that one. I like it. I like it. That was good. Thank you. And then we have Patty.
Thank you. Yeah, I thought about this question a lot. And one of the things so my advocacy looks like, I testified for the Fair Start for Kids Act. I've been interviewed by a bunch of different publications and media outlets about my experience with childcare during the pandemic. And I'm bothered a little bit by that because I think, I have privilege, we are very comfortably middle class, and these things happen to us. And so people see me as, kind of representative of what happened. But, these problems existed before. You know, they are felt the hardest by people who are considered lower class, but because they're lower class, people don't necessarily care about their story as much, which is a travesty. And so in my advocacy, it's been really important for me to, yes, be a face for these issues that we're trying to improve, but also to lift up those who might be seen as lower than me and lift them up with me. You know, it's not about just like raising everyone up one step. I want to raise everyone up to where I am too. So it's been really important for me to keep my ears open, listen to other people's stories about their struggles that I might not be able to fully understand because I'm not in the position that they're in. But it's still important to reflect those situations and those stories in my own advocacy towards legislators and other policymakers. So it's been a real like journey and growing opportunity for me to do that, but I'm also very honored to be able to be that voice for people. So I will continue to do that. I will continue to learn, and I hope that I am doing people justice.
Thank you. I love all the information that you all have shared. One of the things that resonates with me, well, not one, I can go through a whole bunch of all the things that were said, but it's the networking. I remember when I first got into this, I had no idea what ECAP was. You know, my child, he was in the foster care system, and I put him in this one multicultural child and family hope center to watch him, and that was like a spur of the moment thing. They came to me and they said, your son's eligible for ECAP. You want him to be in? They said, well, it's free. And I said, oh, okay. And then I said, what is ECAP? And from then, the family support person gave me all these different connections, and I'm here today doing this. And I rarely say no, so I don't know. Preschool, I was there watching. I wanted to know what was going on. So I just want to say, keep doing what you all are doing. Now I'm going to take us to the last question. And this requires you to give me the good, well, all of us, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Okay, we're all here listening to you all. And my last question is what is the biggest lesson that you have learned so far that you want to share with us today? It could be good, it could be bad, it could be ugly. But I know we're going to appreciate it no matter what it is. And with this, we can give you 4 minutes each to answer. So take your time. And let's start with Cecilia.
Thank you, Caroline. When I read this question, it was really hard for me to respond. So, okay, oh my gosh, there are so many lessons. So I just think in one, and I wanna share, and I wanna speak in Spanish. No tener miedo cuando se trata de defender la educación o de la primera infancia. Porque todos somos responsables de los niños de nuestra comunidad. Necesitamos, creo yo, empezar a ver a cada niño de la comunidad como nuestro propio hijo. Es un gran desafío, es una gran responsabilidad, porque puede traer diferentes emociones, algunas de ellas negativas o frustrantes. Sin embargo, yo creo que todo vale la pena cuando se trata de la educación y el bienestar de los niños. Los niños, and I want to say this in English, I know that everyone who is in this room see the children as important people. But I'm thinking about the answer is, okay, everyone in the community, sorry, I'm gonna go back English and Spanish. Los niños necesitan saber que la comunidad los ve como personas importantes, que los valoramos, respetamos y apoyamos. Y tener en cuenta, como dije antes, que si no hacemos algo ahorita por la educación de la primera infancia, estaremos descuidando a los niños y estaremos descuidando a la comunidad. La lección que yo me llevo es que si queremos un futuro mejor, si queremos una comunidad saludable y próspera, debemos actuar. Hacer lo que necesitemos hacer como padres de familia, como líderes, como maestros, como nuestro papel, lo que tengamos que hacer para defender la educación y la integridad de nuestros niños. Yo creo que cada acción e interacción que tengamos, hagamos o tomemos a favor de nuestros niños va a impactar sus vidas y va a impactar nuestra comunidad. Así que la lección sería no tener miedo cuando se trata de abogar por la educación de la primera infancia. No matter if you don't speak English or no matter anything, use your voice.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Next.
Yeah, so I agree with Cecilia. This was sort of a hard question to answer because there's been a lot of really hard lessons. But I think that's what happens when you start to do this work and you start to learn about, the things that your community goes through. And so one lesson that I have is that I learned that children are incredibly smart. And because of that, they begin to understand inequities in the system at a very early age. And more specifically, they understand how it applies to them and to their family because of their ethnicity or what language they speak or because of what they look like. So one child that I met, when I met her, she was 6, and she and her trans father were unhoused. They were living on the street. And they, after a year and a half of, being on the street and living in a motel, they finally recently got housing a couple of months ago, which was really amazing. But I wanted to share a quick story, if that's okay, because there's a reason that I have this painting behind me. So as you can see, this is a painting of George Floyd that I did in the CHOP, and it says "The sun never sets on George Floyd." And so I met this child in the CHOP because she was living there with her parent. And I was talking to her and I said, "Oh, have you ever painted before?" And she said that she had never painted. And I was like, "Oh, okay, well, awesome. I have extra paint. I have paintbrushes. How would you feel about painting with me?" And she was like, "Yeah, that would be great." And so, at the time I was working on the yellow, which is supposed to be sunshine shining on George Floyd. And so we were working on the yellow for a bit. And then she takes some red and she starts adding it to his neck here. And, I'm an art educator, so, I'm not mad. I'm just like, "Oh, why are you adding the red?" Because I wanted to see what she said. And she said, "There needs to be blood on it." And I just was like, oh my God, like my heart just broke into a million pieces in that moment. And I was like, this kid is 6. She's homeless with her parent. And she has been through more in 6 years than I have in like 27 years. And at that moment on, it was like everything that I did after that moment, it was every time that I would get tired or discouraged, I would think of her and I would think of everything that she had been through. And I would be like, I can't stop doing this because of what she has experienced. We don't want any child in the future to have to go through what she has been through. And so when she got housing and she and her parent got housing, I was so ecstatic because I was like, she's going to have consistent education. She's going to have consistent housing. Her trans dad can work on getting a job and providing, money for her future education if she wants to do that. And I just I think about that so often, in what drives me. And what lessons I've learned, like I always think back to that moment. And that to me was like, hi baby. That to me was like one of probably the most important lesson that I've ever had in my whole life from a homeless 6-year-old. And so I think we just need to be aware that everything we do is for our community and it's for these kids. And it's so important that we don't stop doing what we're doing, because the people who are most at risk are kids like her. So that was a huge part in my journey, and that was probably the biggest lesson that I've learned so far. So yeah, thanks.
I have chill bumps. I really do. I got chill bumps. I'm sure everyone else did too. Thank you for sharing that. Next.
Thank you, Sakura, for sharing that. I had, when I first read this question, was like, wow, there have been so many lessons in the last year. And the first thing I thought about was the Parent Ambassador Fellowship, the cohort that I was in, that we moved from in-person to online and met every Monday night. And I really gained some sisters and some brothers and some best friends and some family in that group. And so I would like to say, like, what, I had wrote down, oh, we should practice self-care and we should seek out our differences and learn to be a connector. But I, like Sakura, would like to share a story with you. And I think that one of the most impactful stories, one of the biggest lessons, or the biggest lessons that I learned, and I can say it because he's not sitting here, but I've told him before, is from my son, who I had when I was a teenager and I was separated from. And I remember sitting in his first school conference that I could attend, and he had the same teacher that my little sister had had. And the first thing she said when we sat down was, I've never had a problem with a Black child in my class. And I don't know anything else that she said after that, because I sat there thinking, why didn't I bring my mom with me? And why would she say that to me? And I didn't even know that there were any problems with my kid in the class. And gosh, I just felt like I had failed so bad. So I walked home and told my mom that's all I knew. And my mom, of course, spurred into action. I'm one of 7 kids, and my mom had an in-home licensed child care center for over 30 years in Spokane. So she advocated for licensed child care centers because she was a mother of 7 and was home. So fast forward, he experienced many challenges. He did kindergarten twice. They had a program called Step Up, which is kind of like transitional kindergarten now that we're working for. And when we went to enroll him into high school, the school counselor there looked at his grades and looked at him and looked at me and my ex-husband and said, DJ, it'll be a miracle if you graduate from high school, but you're not going to make it to college. So let's just work on you graduating. And I was not a college graduate. No one in my family was a college graduate. And I don't know how to prepare for college except for maybe to get scholarships, but the kid didn't have good grades and he had behavioral problems and he had trauma from being separated from me. And I was a young mom. There were periods where we had been homeless. I guess all of the things, right? So he barely graduated from high school. In fact, he had a math teacher who was a Black man who said, he's not passing this class, but I would never not graduate a Black male from high school because they're not passing a class. So he will graduate. And that teacher has since passed away. And DJ went to his funeral services and talked about him at the funeral services. So fast forward to the pandemic. My son was living in Seattle, Washington. He had just transferred up there from Los Angeles. My kid, who barely graduated from high school, was making 6 figures. He needed the right person to put him into the construction field. And with all of his trauma, and he's a formerly incarcerated person, he's a very successful man. And I'm very proud of him. And I will advocate till the ends of the earth for parents who are told things about their kids that we don't know the answer to, or we don't know how to navigate. And so I think that story, and then I have another quick story of when we first got our two daughters, our lesson was, or our routine was, come home from work, turn on the news and make dinner. So I'd be in the kitchen and I'd be listening to the news. Well, one time I came around the corner and I'd maybe had the girls for 2 weeks, and I'd plopped them in front of the TV, and she was almost 4 at that time, was like this, watching the news. And it was they do all the bad stuff first. And this was in 2012. So immediately there was like, no more news gets watched in the house. I don't have time for it anyways. And so a lesson that we learned during the pandemic was that we needed to watch the news with our kids. And we needed to talk about the news with our kids, because if we didn't watch it, they went other places, or they now had access to go online and had other people telling them history and what their faction of the news actually was. So just yesterday, my daughter reached a mental health professional, and the mental health professional was trying to build rapport with her. And she said, well, tell me some of your goals, and we'll set some goals so that we can, accomplish something. And I'm half listening in the background because she's 13, so she can navigate her own mental health now. And my daughter, she wants to be a pastry chef, and she wants to be a designer, and she has all these things she wants to do. She said, I'm going to be the first female president of the United States. And she didn't say the first female Black president. She just said the first female president of the United States. And I thought, wow, how powerful is that my daughter got to see last year a Black woman become the vice president. And now she can see herself in that role, a kid who came through foster care, a kid who's had all these challenges. And her mental health professional said to her, well, I hope that another woman makes it first, and that you're not the first woman, but I know that it can happen. So for me, the biggest lessons we'll learn will be from our kids and from other people telling us no, and us making it a yes. Thank you.
Right. Thank you so much for that powerful story. Let's move quickly to Patty.
Yes. Gosh, I feel like the other panelists have these great, deep lessons that they've gone through, and mine isn't. It's still important, but I don't have like this great story to go along with it. It's a lesson that I'm still learning, and that's how to talk to people who don't know these experiences. And I find that that's especially true for people who aren't parents, who don't have children, or don't have, family members, aging family members to care for. It's how to talk to them to help them understand how impactful these issues are, that even though they might not see the day-to-day struggles that people are going through, that it very much likely will affect them in the future, and how to get them to care for it right now. When I had my first child and I returned back to work, it was really, really hard. And I worked for a company that was women-owned, women-run. I thought that they would be really understanding about how hard it is to transition back into the workforce after having a child, and they did not. It wasn't a very supportive environment. I was struggling quite badly. And one of my coworkers who hadn't had children yet, she was very, very dismissive of what I was going through. And then it turns out, she just had a baby last year, and she started seeing how the system is kind of meant to hold us down in that respect. And I reached out to her, and it was just one of those things where I wanted to say, the petty part of me wanted to say, I told you so. But instead I was like, look, I'm trying to make these transitions and finding quality childcare and early learning for our children easier, that we shouldn't have these barriers. We shouldn't be forced to make these impossible decisions in our lives. Join me. And how can, knowing your experience of seeing what I went through when I had my first child, and now you're going through it, how do we talk to people who don't have children? How do we get them to understand? And even if it's not children, maybe it's aging relatives. There are moments where you're going to have to make these tough choices between employers wanting your time and but really it's your family that needs your time. So, so yeah, those are things that I'm still learning. And if anyone has advice, I'd love to hear it.
Okay. Thank you so much for that. Because we're at time, I want to thank you all so very much for being here. And thank you, thank you, thank you. I wish we had more time. I'm going to go through this. I'm not going to go quickly, but I want to thank you all today for joining the first ever Early Learning Symposium held by ChildCare Aware of Washington, Washington State Parent Ambassadors, MomsRising, West African Community Council, OneAmerica, and Washington Family Engagement. Special thanks to our sponsors, Perigee, and the Stolte Foundation for helping make this day possible. We've enjoyed hearing from folks today. Let's see, and we want to take the last couple seconds to talk about some next steps. OneAmerica and Washington Parent Ambassadors will be holding a lobby day the first and second week of February, and will be followed with a storytelling training so that all you can grow in telling your stories, your powerful stories, with legislators, and exercise the power of your voice. If you're interested, we ask that you fill out the form in the chat, and you can do it while I'm talking. It should be in there now. And that would be very much appreciated. Remember that we are powerful. Let's continue to take a stand to create systemic change for our communities, regardless of COVID or any barriers that are put in front of us. May you continue to be well, and until we hug each other again, may the power show today keep the fire inside each of us warm and ready to light the path forward. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Have a wonderful day.